Okay, I know. I said I'm reviewing the entire Rambo franchise, and now I'm going to be skipping one of the most important elements of it. You know, what came out in between Rambo 2 and 3, of course, is Rambo, The Force of Freedom, the Saturday morning cartoon show. Yeah, that happened. Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survival Review, and my look at the Rambo franchise continues with the third installment of the series, Rambo III. Now this was the movie that I would watch the least out of the series, and rewatching this review, I realized why. Because it's not that good, to be honest. Now, I don't think it's awful by any means. It was just kind of dull to me. I didn't find it that exciting. It has a few moments here and there that are really fun and really great, but aside from that, it feels like kind of a dull version of Rambo 2. So this movie begins with John Rambo just living his life in Thailand. At the beginning of the movie, you see him participating in these stick fights for money on the side, and then you see that he works for this monastery for these monks, just to help him out because it gives him a sense of purpose. But then Colonel Troutman comes to see him. Basically tells him he's putting together this elite group of people to send to Afghanistan to help the people there because the Russians are in there and basically are trying to take over, so he wants to help out the people of Afghanistan. But Rambo turns down his offer. He just says, you know, my war is done, I don't need to fight anymore. So he turns him down and goes back to his business. But Troutman goes on the mission regardless of him. While on the mission, Troutman's team ends up getting caught. He ends up getting captured. So now Rambo is going on a one-man mission to rescue him. So at the time, this was the most expensive movie ever made. And it does show. Like, this movie looks really grand. There's a lot of epic shots in here where there's a bunch of extras. There's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of explosions. A lot of crazy stuff. So it does look very good. But there's something about it that just like puts it down from the first two films. I think one of the things that has to do with that is the pacing. The pacing in the first two movies is really good. It's really tight. The movies just get started and like immediately they're off and running. This one takes a while to get moving. It takes a good like 35 minutes to really get going and really get exciting. And that first act, while, you know, isn't the worst thing in the world, like, I don't know, it wasn't that interesting to me and came off as kind of dull. I feel like dull is the word I'm going to be using a lot during this review, because you have the whole first act, you have, you know, the Troutman trying to recruit Rambo. Okay, well, first off, you have that opening scene of the stick fighting that he does, which is actually a really good scene. It's very memorable, too. It's also memorable because of Hot Shots Part 2, which takes a lot from this movie, including getting Richard Crenna to play the Colonel Troutman type character in that.
I see you're no stranger to pain.
I've been married. Twice.
Wait.
But that's a very memorable sequence. But then, you know, you have like Troutman and Rambo talking. Rambo says no, so then Troutman goes on his mission. And then, you know, Kurtwood Smith, Clarence Boddicker himself, convinces Rambo to go on his own mission. And then you see Rambo like meeting up with the people. He asks who's going to help him. You see him like training a little bit. You see him doing that horse riding game and all stuff. I don't know. That whole first act just came off as kind of dull to me. But when the action kicks in, it's alright. It's not as good as the second film, definitely. And even when the action kicks in, there's still a lot of times where it kind of just like stops and it kind of restarts back up. Whereas like the second film, the movie just kept moving. Once it started, it just kept going and didn't let up. And like, so the pacing in that movie and the first one really worked. This one was just kind of like, I don't know, start and stop and just not that exciting. And then you get to the action sequences, they're solid, but there's something about them that they don't quite work as well, especially as like the action scenes in the second film. I think they weren't as well directed. There's still some really good stuff, like the aerial stuff with the helicopters is fantastically shot. That stuff looks great. And there are some fun action moments in there. There's a good classic Rambo-esque scene inside a cave where he's taking down the guys one by one. That's really fun and really good. Has some fun moments in there. And you get to the climax of the movie and you have like the Russian planes plus all the Russian soldiers and tanks coming at them. And all of a sudden they turn and there's like the Afghan like rebels on their horses just coming in. And it turns to this big like sprawling action sequence. That was a lot of fun. That was pretty entertaining. Though the way the villain gets taken out is super silly and kind of dumb. But aside from that, the whole climactic action scene was a lot of fun for its big, over-the-top ridiculousness. what I do like is I do kind of like the story in that I like the idea of Colonel Troutman getting captured and then Rambo having to save him. I just like involving like Troutman in the actual story more instead of having to be the guy who kind of sits home and, you know, constantly tells people not to fuck with Rambo. This time he actually gets involved, and I kind of like that as really good motivation for Rambo. It differentiates it from the first two films by having, like, you know, Rambo have like a more clear mission of like, I have to save this guy who's super important to me. And then when you get to the climax and you see Troutman and Rambo like fighting side by side, there's something about that was just really satisfying to see like this character who throughout the last two movies talks about how like he trained him and how he knows him so well, you know, knows him perfectly. So to see them like working together was like really satisfying and really cool. Like I liked that. I thought that was a good like progression from the series, from Troutman being the guy who always stays off to the side to someone who actually gets involved in the action. And I really like that. I get to see Mark Springtime and Richard Crenna, he's really good. Of course, you do have that one scene though where he's getting tortured and he has to spout out his typical Rambo dialogue of how you're screwed for messing with Rambo.
Who do you think this man is? God.
Oh, God would have mercy. He won't.
From just watching those first two movies recently and then watching this one and hearing him like when he says that dialogue, I'm just like, yep, there it is. There's the classic Troutman dialogue, you know. So I liked all of that. That stuff is good. It's kind of weird. The movie both tries to take itself a little bit more seriously than Rambo 2, but it's also at times like cheesier in terms of like dialogue. Like there's a lot more like one-liners and cheesy dialogue coming from Rambo himself than in like the last one.
Who are you?
Your worst nightmare.
But like I said, also the story tries to take itself a little more seriously and handle the subject matter a little more serious, which I do think kind of takes away from the movie. Like you think you would appreciate that because First Blood was a serious movie, so this one might be going back to that seriousness. That by it being this cheesy movie that takes itself like too seriously, just it doesn't mesh and makes the movie feel more dull compared to the last one, which was silly, but it felt like it kind of knew it was silly and was just embracing it. This one tries to do both and it doesn't quite match and just comes off as a little bit awkward. But I'd also like to give a shout out to Jerry Goldsmith, who did the scores for the first three films in the series, and I forgot to mention him in the previous two videos, but his scores are just fantastic. Like the themes and everything are iconic and great and epic and heroic and some of the best action movie scores out there. There is one really good scene in the movie where Rambo gets hit by this, like, I don't know what it was, if it was like an arrow or something. It gets stuck in his side, and after the big fight scene, he has to pull it out, and there's this great effect that just, like, I, like, cringed when I saw it, where there's, you know, an entry and exit wound, and he pushes his fingers, he digs his fingers into the entry wound, and you see the piece that was inside him, like, fall out for the exit wound. And that part just like got me. I was like, oh Jesus, like the effect for that was really good. That was really brutal. And then he has to cauterize the wound. So he has this little stick with fire on it and like sets it in his side. You see like flames come out the end of the wound. Like I was like, ah, Jesus. Like that was a really good moment. That was the one time that like the serious stuff in this movie actually worked. Because you really see Rambo's pain and just how truly tired he is and everything. So I thought that moment was really good. This movie also lacks the memorable characters from the last two films. This one really just has Rambo and Troutman and that's it. Like you have the villain, who's this like Russian general character, who has a lot more screen time than the villain in the second movie, but is still very bland and forgettable. And just like really cheesy and over the top and like, I don't know, there's really nothing about him that stuck out or was really memorable. He was just kind of bland and just kind of there. But aside from him, there's really no other really great characters. There's a couple of the like Afghan like rebels that like Rambo's with. There's this kid character who kind of runs along and everything and Rambo has to save at one point. But they don't really make much of an impression. I feel like not a whole lot goes too far with them. Like the kid didn't really, there wasn't too much to the kid except for like, oh, I don't want a kid to be involved because, you know, I'm Rambo. Everyone around me gets murdered. But yeah, I don't know. There's really no interesting characters, like side characters to go along for the ride, to which there's plenty of them in the first two movies. This one definitely lacks that.
What do you say, John?
Fuck him.
So Rambo 3 overall isn't an awful movie, and in like 80s action movie standards, it isn't that bad, but it's just kind of an uneven movie that has an uneven pace and uneven tone with occasional spurts of really great and memorable action sequences, but it doesn't all come together, and it's just a kind of a dull, okay movie. Especially compared to the first two movies, which I really like. It is a letdown, despite the fact that it does something interesting with the story. Like I said, I like the Troutman aspect of the story and heavily involving him. I really like that idea, but the rest of it just isn't that great. And, you know, it was worth checking out for at least a watch if you're a fan of the franchise, if you like Rambo, if you like Sylvester Stallone. It's worth checking out at least once, but it's not the one you're going to want to revisit a whole lot down the line, especially compared to the first two. So, that's all I have to say about Rambo 3, but of course, the franchise still isn't over, so until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.